I gotta talk about studio changes. Yo, what's good, it's your boy Reviews. And after doing a poll on what the best art and animation for an anime was of the year, most of the votes went to AOT, but people in the comments that voted for Demon Slayer and JJK were not happy, some saying the show wasn't the same since the change in production after season 3. That's got me thinking of all the animes that changed studios. Of all the animes that changed studios, there are 3 shows that come to mind that I have noticed the change in studio. We all know that certain animes have changed studios during production, as the main production committee may give the show to another studio for certain reasons, usually relating to money and time. Other times the studio are just too busy with certain projects. But I wanted to talk about the 3 shows that I noticed a change in studio and talk about whether or not the change improved or ruined or didn't really have an impact on the show. The first show that comes to mind is The 7 Deadly Sins, which is notorious for this change. So seasons 1 and 2 were animated by A1 Pictures, and season 3 was handed over to Studio Dean. So why the change of studios? Well, some reports say that it was due to the fact that the first movie, Prisoners of the Sky, didn't meet expectations in the box office. The production committee lost money in the end, so it led to a change in studios. Yeah, I've seen the entire show in its entirety on Netflix, and in my honest opinion, the art doesn't look too bad. You only notice the difference mainly in season 3 when we see the fight sequences, particularly the infamous scene of Meliodas versus Escanor, which got completely trashed online and it made many fans drop the entire show altogether. I personally thought that the show started to get better in season 4 and the final 2D movie. You could tell that Studio Dean heard all the complaints and they tried their damn best to try and make it look as good as possible. But I do understand those that were huge fans of Meliodas and Escanor and wanted to see that fight sequence adapted as faithfully as possible. Next up, the 2000 version of Beyblade to V-Force. A lot of people probably didn't even really notice the change, and there doesn't seem to be any reason as to why they changed studios. The first season was done by Madhouse, with the second studio being animated by Nihon Animation, and I personally think it was for the best. The art style resembles the manga much more than season 1. Season 1's art style resembled anime of the 90s, and the change in studios really revamped the show and made it fresh, and the use of CGI Beyblades really made watching the action sequences a lot more satisfying. With the CGI Beyblades, the action sequences were much more intense and gripping to watch, making kids want to go out and buy the toys. And I personally feel like it was for the best because I think the G-Revolution era of Beyblade was the most popular. I could make a whole video talking about this era of Beyblade, but that's for another day. And finally, the main anime that changed studios that I wanted to talk about in this video is AOT. A couple of years back, with one of the AOT producers, they stated in an interview that season 3 marked a turning point in the story. The characters made it to the ocean, and as creators they wanted the anime to escalate even further. With discussions at which studio, they came to the conclusion that it would be difficult to continue the production of Attack on Titan. So in short, they needed a studio that could completely finish the final arcs of this show, which ended up being Mappa. And I've talked to death about the whole studio change and my opinions on it, but to give a summary of it, I really do like the studio change, and I feel like it was the best time to change studios, as the end of season 3 marked the end of the pre-time skip and the end of Eren and his friend's journey fighting the Titans in the walls. And as we transition over to Marley with a 4-year time skip with all the characters being older, the story started to become morally grey, as well as it just being a lot darker. Our protagonist was now being an antagonist. A dark cloud was weighing over most of the characters, which reflected in the art style looking desaturated and muted at times. I like the change. I've always liked the change. Although the first season of Mappa, which was the final season part 1, getting some mixed responses, overall people started to appreciate Mappa's animation as they were really improving as the seasons went on, making one of the most spectacular and satisfying anime endings of all time. And those are the 3 anime series that changed studios that I wanted to talk about, but there have been many many other series that have changed studios. The most notorious one is One Punch Man. I watched the first season many years ago, and I haven't seen the second season, but I've seen some clips and stills here and there, and from what I've seen, it doesn't look that bad. Season 1 was done by Madhouse and season 2 was done by JC Staff. I haven't seen season 2 yet, and I think the overwhelming negative response to season 2 put me off at the time when it was released. But I have seen the clips online and I still don't think it looks that bad. Maybe I have to watch the entire season to truly understand what major differences are made in JC Staff's version. Gunslinger Girl is another anime I watched a long time ago, but I never saw the seasons made by Artsland. The earlier seasons were done by Madhouse as well. Fairy Tail is another anime I watched in the early days of the pandemic, but I did stop during the episode 100 era of episodes, which was way before the studio change. A1 Pictures and State Light produced the earlier seasons, and then the final few seasons were done by A1 and Bridge. The only change I noticed is the color palette looking a little bit muted, but if I'm being honest, a lot of these changes wouldn't impact my enjoyment of the show. The only anime studio change that happened where all of the staff stayed on was Vinland Saga. Never seen this anime before, and I wasn't even really aware of it until Wit Studio announced that they will be handing it over to Mappa, with most of the animation team staying on board, resulting in the art and animation resembling the earlier seasons. I think that's cool that they were able to keep their show consistent, having the same team of animators on board. Overall, the most common comments I've been seeing with these studio changes is that the fans all feel like the newer studios are more faithful to the manga art style, yet at the same time, they felt like the animation was better in the previous studios. People always initially dislike having the change because they feel like the consistency would be ruined. And finally, Hunter x Hunter, while the second series is a remake, they did change studios for the second series. First original one, made in 1999, was done by Nippon Animation, and the remake was done by Studio Madhouse. I've only watched the Madhouse adaptation made in 2011 and I liked it a lot. The animation was very slick and fluid, and at the time of when I watched it, I did remember seeing some stills of the original one and I didn't like it at first, but after seeing some of those stills in motion and seeing other scenes in the original one, it honestly surprised me by how well made it looked at the time. And a video that has gained over 2 million views comparing the two versions, nearly every single comment also agrees that the original series had a really unique art style. For me, it was mainly with the scene of Kurapika. Just looking at the scene alone, there's just so much intensity and grittiness to this moment. It reminded me of a Hollywood horror flick, and it's honestly made me want to go and watch that original show. But while I have talked about studio changes that I liked or wasn't too bothered by, and the changes that some fans weren't too keen on, there have been studio changes that have completely surpassed the original, with the Fate series being one of the main ones. It started off with Studio Dean. No hate towards Dean, but my gosh, Ufotable's animation looks incredible. Another positive studio change was the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise with Season 0, with Toei Animation doing that season and then switching to Studio Gallop. While I have never watched the show, I have known about this studio change for some time, and it's for the best because my gosh, Gallop's art style looks a lot better. While people are free to have their opinions about how an anime looks, I do feel like those that go online and send death threats and harass animators online because they don't like a certain sequence, that's when I draw the line, and I think those people are quite garbage in my opinion. These poor animators get paid pennies and they don't tend to have a voice in what is done within the studios, whether they want more time or not, and the whole studio change is completely out of their control. While people are free to have their opinions about how an anime looks, don't be a jerk about it. But tell me in the comments down below, what do you guys think of this? What is your favorite anime studio change and what is your least favorite change? Tell me. Like for more anime reactions, reviews, comparisons, breakdowns, rankings, and more. Thank you for watching, and as always, a boy dude review signing out.